Never underestimate the power of a story. James Corden had a show called Carpool Karaoke, in which he invited musical guests to get into his car and then he'd drive around, interview them and sing a song with them. Now, I must confess, I never actually watched one of these episodes, but it was hugely successful. It was so successful, in fact, that I know somebody who decided to do like a homage to it and copy the format. So he attached a smartphone to his dash. He'd invite friends and colleagues from the industry he worked in, and he would drive around and interview them. And then he would upload the interview onto his social media. And I noticed one or two comments started to appear about the safety issue. If he wasn't concentrating 100% on the road, then that was dangerous. And he said, oh, no. I know the route like the back of my hand, and I drive around when it's quiet, so there's no danger, there's no jeopardy. But the comments persisted. If you're not concentrating 100% on driving, how can you do a good job? The underlying assumption was that, well, if it's good enough for James Corden, then why isn't it good enough for me? Then an article appeared some while ago about how the shows were put together. And there was a photograph of the interior of the car that James Corden drove. And it was festooned with cameras. There must have been at least a dozen. And they were obscuring the windscreen. And then there was a shot of the trailer that the car was towed on. So James Corden never drove the car. He was just pretending to. And a lot of people were disappointed by this because they'd bought into the story that he was driving the car and interviewing and singing. And that was important to them for some reason. But then when you think about it, it doesn't make any sense, because if you're a performer and you're given a job of interviewing someone or singing or acting, then you want to give that job 100%. So you don't want to be distracted with having to do other things that aren't really necessary. So the car was towed, so James Corden could just focus on his job. In the same way that when you're driving, really you should want to concentrate 100% on your driving. Another example is decades ago, I was at a party with a friend of mine who's a musician and a wit and raconteur. And he was holding court at the party. He was talking to a group of teenage acolytes who were hanging on to his every word. And he was describing how the police wrote their songs. The band, not the force. And he was saying they just jammed until something interesting occurred and they said, oh, that's good, let's develop that, turn it into a song. Now, I don't know if the police wrote their songs like that, but that's what he said. But I remember one of the people in the group kept shaking his head and going, that's bad, that's bad. And I thought, why is it bad? How does it affect the song? Because if you liked the police songs, what difference does it make how it was put together? But it does. And he'd bought into the story that artists create their work through a process of struggle, angst, inspiration, genius. So they're struck with some idea, they have to work through the night sweating over the guitar and lyrics until finally, boom, there it is. And that's the story that a lot of people buy into. A story probably told by a storyteller who wanted to aggrandise his own or her own craft. Anyway, it's a great story and people like it, so they buy into it. So that's why this teenager was like, I'm disappointed. So that's how stuff comes about. But that's the power of a story. So when you put a presentation together and you have a message that you want to convey to your audience, wrap it in a story. Now, how you do that is down to your creativity, but it's the story that people buy into. And it's that allows them to carry the message.